Welcome to Basic Shape Manipulation. I'm going to take out this box and drop it in right here and talk about all the ways you can manipulate this object. In other words, move it around, change its shape, that type of thing. Before I do any of that, I want to talk about down here the edit grid little section because it's kind of forgotten about and it's pretty important. The first thing you should know is you can switch it between millimeters and inches. You can also do bricks, but we're not going to worry about that. I'm going to work in millimeters today. Sometimes, depending on the project we may assign to you, we may ask you to work in inches or millimeters. I particularly like millimeters in general just because that's how science does it for the most part. And it makes more sense to me because I'm not working in fractions so much. It's a little easier for me to think about how I'm going to change the shape of my object. You can also change the size of the work plane here, but in most cases you won't have to worry about that. The other thing you should know is how the snap grid works. So right now it's set to 1 millimeter. Now what that means is when I move this box around, it moves in 1 millimeter chunks. You can see it's kind of jumpy. It moves in 1 millimeter sections, which is fine. That might be good for you, but if you're trying to get something in that exact perfect spot, you might need less than 1 millimeter. So for instance, if I do 0.5, you can see that it's a little less jumpy. I'll do this with my arrow key so you can see a little bit more. If I go all the way to off, it moves so slowly you can barely see it moving. And sometimes you might need that. So if you're trying to get something exactly perfect, you might switch to off for snap grid or say 0.1. So the movement is much smaller. If you're trying to say put a button into the side of a phone and you want it to stick out just the right amount, changing your snap grid might be the way to go. All right, so now that we've covered that, let's talk about moving around the object with the mouse. Now, you aren't looking at my mouse right now, but I think I can describe it and you'll get the idea. So to move the object around, just click anywhere on the object, hold down the left click, and it will move around on the work plane. It's not lifting off the work plane. We'll talk about that later. But it does move around it. What you want to make sure to do is grab any part of the object that isn't one of these little indicator boxes. Because if you try to move it and one of these are lit up red, instead of moving it, you're going to change the shape of the object. And you might not want to do that. If you're having a hard time getting the box because they're all close together, then zooming in usually does the trick. Oh, see, I just did it there. So back to regular cube shape. So if you hold right click down on your mouse, right click, you will kind of orbit around the object. This is very handy if you need to look at a different part of it, or if you have another object you're trying to push in or add to this object. Right click will allow you to kind of move around it. Your scroll wheel on your mouse will zoom in and out if you scroll with it. And very importantly, it also works as a button. So let's say I'm zoomed in down here, but I need to look in the top right corner and I want to still be this close. If you hold right click, you can't get up there very well. It kind of skips over it. But if you hold down the scroll wheel, you can pan left and right and up and down and get to where you want to be much easier. I'll zoom out so you can see it a little better. So I'm holding down the middle mouse scroll button and I can pan up and down and left and right. So that way I can move around the object. You can do all of that with the keyboard, but it is much, much harder, and it's not even really worth me explaining how to do it. Just get yourself a mouse. In our classes, we will have one for you if you don't have one yourself. All right, so make sure I don't forget anything over here. You also have the view cube in the toolbar over here. So let me go over that real quick. The view cube also moves around the object. It's a little clunkier. It's not as smooth as using the actual mouse. But the good thing about it is if you want to look at it directly from the front, you can just click front. If you want a 45-degree angle, front and side, you can click right at that spot right there. Here's the right side. All right, so the view cube can be very helpful, let's say, if you want to look at it straight from the top. It's not centered in the middle of the screen, though. That's where this comes into play. You click this, and it will fit to view, which basically means center your view, so you're looking on it dead on. If you're wondering what that square is here, that's actually like X-ray vision. You can see through the object. It's the movement cubes down there in the bottom. So again, that will zoom in no matter when you press it. If you're here, it'll put it in the middle. If you're over here, whatever object you're clicked into, it will put it in the middle for you. So if you want top view middle, you have to click top first. You can zoom in and out here as well. But again, you'll probably just end up using your scroll wheel to do that. All right, so that's basic movement around the object. So now let's do some resizing of this object. You heard me mention these manipulation cubes here. They're basically resizing cubes. I'll start with the black ones. Right, the black ones move a whole side. So if I want to elongate this box, I can grab the black cube and it will only pull it this direction. That goes for all of them. So that brings it that way. This brings it that way. That one obviously brings it out. If I want to move two sides at once, that's where the white ones come in. All right, so depending on which way I pull it, it moves kind of everything at once except for the up and down angle. The one on top will make your box taller or shorter, or whatever object that you're using. All right, so very importantly, I don't want to leave this part out. Sometimes you have the proportions you want for your object, but you made it too small. You want to make it bigger without messing up the proportion from left to right to front to back or something. And that's where shift comes in on the keyboard. Let's say I have this box the way that I want it right now, but I just want the whole thing bigger. If I hold shift and grab any of these other boxes with my mouse and pull in or out, it changes all of the proportions, all of the measurements together at the same time and keeps the same proportion. All right, so it gets wider, it gets taller, and it gets deeper all at once. All right, shift is your friend. You're probably going to use it more than you think. You can also, just so you know, click, let's say I click this corner, and I need this box to be exactly 25.5 millimeters from front to back. You can actually type that in, 25.5, and it will elongate it exactly the size you want. You're going to find that especially important if you're making something in real life, for an actual thing you're trying to solve in real life. The 8th graders will use it for multi-tools. The 7th graders will use it for designing their phone. You're going to need very specific measurements, and just grabbing a corner and moving it around doesn't always cut it. So actually clicking in the boxes will allow you to move in and out. Will allow you to change the measurements exactly how you want them to be changed. All right, so you may be at a point where you want to move this object left or right, and I believe I mentioned this in an earlier video, and that's where arrow keys can come in for you. You can use the arrow keys to move your object left or right, and depending on the snap grid, it will move more or less. Right now I have it on 0.1, so it barely moves, but if I put it on on 5 millimeters, it moves quite a bit. It moves in 5 millimeter increments. So depending on what you're looking to do, you can do that. This comes in handy when you're trying to put something together. You have multiple objects you're trying to place within each other or near each other. Using the arrow keys gives you a little bit more control than what you would have with the mouse. Uh, Now, one last thing, well, really two. If you need to get the box or the object off the ground, there's a cone shape here, and it is actually like a lifter. It will lift it up and off the ground. You can see over here how far it is off the ground, and you can adjust that yourself if you want. If I put 0, it's going to put it right back on the ground. If you are looking under the box, the cone shows up under the box. So if you're looking at it and you're expecting it to be up there and you're like, oh my God, where did it go? It's definitely there. It's probably just on the bottom. All right, so one last thing. You can twist the object. Look very closely. You can see a curved arrow set here, a curved arrow set here, and a curved arrow set here. And it puts up basically a protractor. You can change the angle of your object. Just be careful when you do it, and do it exactly the amount you want. Let's say I want to go 90 degrees. You can go 90 degrees, and I twisted it 90 degrees. And just like before, you can put in whatever number you want. 45 degrees. Let's say I didn't want it to go 45 degrees that way. I wanted it to go 45 degrees the other way. You can put in negative 45 and it will twist the opposite direction. All right, so that is basic shape manipulation.